going first. Marcy, going first.
The idea is to just review the rest of you on the steps. Don't get too worried.
See it done!
See what you did to my brother?
See it done!
See what you lot did to my brother?
See it done! See it done!
And it represents
And no one's got anything to say, not even sorry.
See it done!
others who've died in this police station. This one, here, this one, 2 years ago. Sean Rigg.
Have you got any bodies in there to go in here?
Nobody downstairs in the cell or
So
in the
there's no one to take responsibility.
No officer standing
Well,
around
everyone's
the
suddenly
whole
disappeared.
time. Livid. I'm absolute. I want you to go and tell you I am absolutely livid. I'm not afraid of anybody here. I'm livid. Absolutely livid. But I'll need to come out because I'm mad.
This is how we feel
It could be
when you guys don't take care of our loved ones. Do you see what I mean? We've got a right. We've got a right to do this. Bring the inspector out. Tell
Bring
him to
Mark
come.
Wallace. Where's Suzanne Wallace? Can you bring her out, please? Is she on duty tonight? Oh, she's been transferred. I wonder why. Because we got her on tape saying that the camera was working. No, that's the public knowledge.
We don't tell people to take that time. Not knowing about not take that time. We just talk for a real my right scene as well. Every time we hush. And they have to on every feet. And on their feet. And sometimes no, we stand up. No. I'm fighting with justice. You understand me? We don't have no more time to let them sit on power no more.
What do we want? Justice! When do we want it? Now! What do we want? Justice! When do we want it? Now!
I'm on a train that only stops at stations for the dead. So screaming Brixton mourns another son, the cries still ringing in my ears, laments of sisters, brothers, mothers, their journey will be filled with tears. They take a path they did not choose, a battle that they must not lose. My job? To capture fragments of this story, but like a Godard movie, it's futile to sit back. The script that you expect is broken. The film can only end in black. To those who think all's well in England, these witnesses and Marx's poetry are here to wake you from your sleep. It's time to act like lions, not like sheep. To comrades and to those who fight, to those who speak, to those with sight, consume the pictures, have your fill, then shout, not government, but people's will. In his poetry about the Long March, Chairman Mao said, "To reach the top of the mountains, we must march to the clouds." This is a photograph of two brothers and one sister. It's taken at some sort of celebration. In this film, we find out what happened a few years after this photograph was taken.
Sean was a very creative person and very talented. He started off as a dancer, and he was quite well known in the early 80s in this kind of hip hop dance scene. He was a popper, and he just used to practice all the time.
Sean was a very sort of ambitious person, hard-working, really determined person. He was into music, so he rapped, he wrote his own lyrics.
The music was about his life. He was well travelled. So he wrote music while he was in Thailand, in Ethiopia, in the Caribbean, the Philippines.
His dream was to be a musician, rapper, produce his own albums and his own music, and to go worldwide, basically. I don't think he thought that anything could stop him. He used to take me out on the raving scene to the jazz clubs and rare groove clubs, and so, you know, and he used to really protect me, and that was his thing, as my big brother.
Sean had a mental illness for at least 20 years. He was in and out of hospital during that time. Most of the time he actually was quite normal when he was taking medication, and a lot of people were totally unaware of the fact that he had any mental health issues.
Sometimes when we used to go and see him in hospital, you know, he was just really unable to recognise us. So we used to sometimes just look at him from afar and look at him through the glass and stuff like that. But then when he was able to kind of recognise people, was able to go and spend time with them and stuff like that. And, you know, he used to come and see us a lot.
A woman goes on a journey. She visits the grave of her father and lays flowers there. She feels something is wrong.
I received a telephone call from my sister at about 2:30 a.m. and she told me that the police had contacted her and said that they needed to come and speak to her face to face.
They knocked on the door and came into the hallway, and I said, "Where's Sean? What's happened?" And they said, "Do you want to sit down?" I said, "No, just tell me what's happened." And they said that Sean had passed away.
They told us that Sean had just collapsed in the police station.
He just collapsed. I just started crying.
So they were like, you know, we don't know the full circumstances, there's going to be an investigation.
And they said, "Oh, you can't see him." So, you know, even in my state, I knew that a person who dies has to be formally identified. So I said, "But he has to be formally identified." And they said, he's sealed off. So I said, "What do you mean he's sealed off?" That language didn't resonate. I didn't understand. And they said, "He's in a body bag."
The role of the police in society is to protect and serve the interests of the rich. The police, as well as the military, are the armed bodies of the state. Though the police force has increasingly become militarized, unlike the army, the police at its inception projected itself as a force that had been created to provide protection for everyone. The wooden truncheons with which it was originally unleashed were never used in the mansions of the rich, but against the poor, hungry, and the destitute. With the passage of time, the wooden truncheons have been replaced by guns and more of repressive weapons, but its core reason for existence is to act as the first legalized armed might of the ruling classes remains unchanged.
Even in the midst of desolation, the lust for life goes on. Even in the cells of a police station, the panic bell rings long. When things go wrong, the acting starts, the mimics in the mirror. A blow too far, a kick too hard, at brain or heart or liver. The famous taxi driver line is answered by each cop. It's to themselves they're talking to. The acting never stops. He fell, he slipped, he dropped down dead. He banged his head too soon. Oh bloody hell, we've lost him, Sarge. What are we gonna do?
Whenever there's a death in custody, the police have to call in the IPCC.
The statutory obligation of the IPCC is to try and secure and maintain public confidence in the system of complaining against the police.
At that point, we had no idea who the IPCC were. And they were telling us that the IPCC were now investigating.
What we do is look at the evidence, aim to find out what happened, search for the truth and report it without fear or favour.
The IPCC said that they will carry out an independent investigation into the death of my brother.
So what will happen is invariably the force will ring us up, or if it's out of office hours, the on-call senior investigator, and the senior investigator immediately says, right, have you sealed the scene? Have you got the cops, separated them? Have you got the first accounts? Have you seized the CCTV? And we'll get an investigator out, or a team of investigators out as soon as we possibly can. So we treat it as a crime scene. And then it's our investigation.
All sides at war, but who will win? the battle lines are drawn, a no man's land's created that can't see dusk nor dawn. Dark corridors of power, fortifications built of files, investigating words and statements, investigating truth and lies. This governmental watchdog must sniff the boots of cops for evidence of malice, for evidence of rot.
If there's been police contact, and invariably there is some sort of contact, then we would take that. So it is a crime scene. We direct and control over the phone whilst we're getting resources out to the scene.
The IPCC turned up around midnight. Now Sean had been formally declared dead at 9:24.
The IPCC arrived at the station at 12, but they actually didn't go down to examine the area where Sean died until 4:05 in the morning.
We asked them, well, where were they? And that's when they told us they were in meetings with the police. And that's when we dug. They were doing the press release, right? So why are they doing a press release rather than at the scene, forensically examining the scene?
Investigating the death of someone is always going to be difficult. Any family could only ever be satisfied by the death not having occurred, if I can put it that way. So whatever we tell them, they're not going to say thank you to us. I think that is a reality. And police officers generally would prefer us not to be investigating them. So none of those immediate people involved are going to be grateful to the IPCC.
The capitalists must have their soldiers. The dying queen must have her peace. The cost to all of us is freedom. The price to pay is the police. The officers take to the streets. Labour MPs are by their side. They're up against the ministers who won't give them an easy ride. The government is cutting costs. The cops can't have more pay. The cops feel stabbed right in the back. It's just the British way. 10,000 cops march through the streets, and then 10,000 more. The cameras just keep rolling. There go 10,000 more. I filmed 100 demonstrations, some violent, some raw, but the sight of all these officers is one I never saw. I've filmed 100 demonstrations, defending all our rights, but a police demonstration, now that's another sight. Suppression of the people's will, the jibing and pure malice, the kettling of innocence like Mum and little Alice. Yet here they are, the very few who would control the many. They want our solidarity. Why should we give them any? They're so polite with cameras rolling. They're so polite without their gas, without their batons, guns and tasers, without their deep blue battle dress. They're sacrificed in private deals just like the NHS. They're sacrificed with civil rights that they help to suppress. The good behaviour's broken to boo and hiss and jeer, but the politicians not for spending another pound on fear.
Sean was, in the morning, the staff had gone to his room because they hadn't seen him for a couple of days. They knocked on his door. They could hear him moving around in his room, but he failed to answer the door. So they became concerned, and I think they went back a bit later. He did answer the door, and they said that he kind of looked at them with a blank stare and sort of was a bit threatening towards them. So they called the care team, and this was at 4:30 in the afternoon.
So that was in the building behind you?
That's in the building. Sean used to live in a room just down here. So the care team apparently said that they didn't have any staff and they couldn't send somebody down, and informed the hostel staff here to call the police. Now, to us, that's unacceptable. They had all these procedures supposedly put in place. All the signs were there, as Sean's long-standing psychiatrist, Dr. Indegra, had said. And that's what we would have expected them to do on that day, is to come down, assess him, and have him taken to a hospital where he could have got the care that he needed on that day. Instead, the staff here was asked to call the police, which they did. In fact, they made 4 calls over a period of, I think it's 3 hours, and the police flatly refused to come out. They said that it was not a matter for the police. They felt it was not a matter because he hadn't done anything criminal. Sean left his room at about just after 7 o'clock, left the building and walked down towards Brixton High Road and off towards New Park Road. You know, that was our worst nightmare for him, leaving here and being out on the street. So this is where the police first interacted with Sean, and he ran across the road, and it's in this direction here. So Sean ran across, climbed the fence over here, and from what we can ascertain, ran and jumped over a little fence here, being pursued, by their accounts, by 1 officer at this time. From here, Sean was restrained.
How many officers were involved at this?
Well, the witness statements vary. From what I can ascertain, one witness says that there was a police vehicle, a car, not a van, parked here, and that she says that Sean was up a tree and there were 2 officers on the green at the time. Now, she says that one of them had hold of Sean's leg and was pulling him, trying to get him from the tree, and the officer here got out of the car, climbed over the fence and started to walk towards the other police. By the time he got there, Sean had been pulled out of the tree, hit the floor. She says that the officers turned him over and hit him in the chest several times, then turned him over and restrained him.
I mean, this is like 3D television, right? There could have been so many witnesses that saw what happened to our brother on that night. Not one of these witnesses said that they saw Sean assault the police officer. Not one of them.
Yeah.
So we've got some serious doubts about whether Sean actually assaulted one of them.
There was one witness that claims to have seen Sean being chased, him being arrested and restrained, which is a very important part. Reading through the documents, it seems that an IPCC investigator had identified this person. His name is in the documents, but for some reason it appears that they didn't go back and take a statement from him. Now, there's a family that claimed that they were all looking out of their windows. They saw Sean taken to the van, put in the van, and when the doors were closed, the van was stood there for a couple of minutes and it was shaking. There was no sound, but the van was shaking. You know, we want to explore that and find out what that's all about. We're now at the rear entrance of Brixton Police Station. So bear in mind, it's only a few minutes drive away. The police van came at speed, hitting 73 miles an hour at one point, flashing blue lights, siren going, and apparently their story is that there was absolutely nothing wrong, everything was normal, sure. So they entered the rear of the police station here, the cage, which is just round the corner on the wall of this building here. He was in the van for 10 minutes before they removed him, almost 10 minutes, and apparently this was so that they could clear the custody suite because he was being violent and they needed to clear the custody suite before they brought him in. The van came in at 7:53. He was moved at 8:03. He was placed on the floor, and a couple of minutes later, he was sat on the floor in a slumped position, and a couple of minutes later, you see him fall to the side, and he doesn't move from that point.
The IPCC press release was completely inaccurate.
What is the cover story now? What do we want to put out to the press? What do we want to put out in the public domain? What do we want the family to believe?
It stated that Sean had assaulted a policeman. That was unfounded.
It was all about covering up.
The press release was a lie.
It suggested that Sean was well up until the point when he arrived into the caged area.
And where he collapsed.
He came to the station and was taken ill, taken to the hospital where he died.
Sean died at Brixton Police Station. He was dead for nearly an hour before he was formally pronounced dead at King's College Hospital.
But for me, that's like trying to separate what's going on at the police station. He didn't actually die here. There was no problem here.
That was very cleverly engineered by the IPCC and the police.
We had a meeting with the IPCC, and we told them that we want it taken down. We want a public apology, which they did. They printed an apology, and we want it corrected because it's misleading. And they had to do it.
IPCC should say no public statements until we've checked anything. And you, as the police, you want to deal with community affairs, that's fine. But it's now we're on the territory, have to respect our view on it. We want to liaise with the family, check with them if a public statement's going to be made, what the content is. And time again, the police use the first report because they know that will be the thing that sticks in the public's mind probably longest over the whole case, is what you first heard about a case, and they will get out their story first.
The function of the media is to make police brutality acceptable. The media in a class-based society exists to promote the ideological interests of the ruling classes. This it does through its television and radio stations, through its films and its newspapers. The media is at once the mouthpiece of the ruling classes, as it is the implanter of its dreams into the heads of the masses.
Reporters are descending, engaged in some mind-bending. The cause of death's debatable. What happened to this man? Where was the scene of crime? Did it happen in the van? Restrained too hard, his heart gave up? The answers they'll be giving. The press must know just what went down and why this man's not living. The journalists will probe and dig, but never far enough. A few investigate the cops, but will not be too tough. The cops and hacks are sharing beds, the back scratchings drawn blood. The newspapers have lost their way, clear waters turned to mud. The bourgeois press wade in at last, they're making up excuses fast. The television's on full blast, the broadcasters' interest here won't last. A partial story's written down, some doubts have now been seeded. The more confusion that they sow, the more that they are needed.
We went to the police station to lay some flowers, and Chief Inspector came out and invited us into the station.
Is that where he has collapsed?
She took us to the spot where Sean had collapsed and where Sean died, to be lying on that floor with officers, you know, standing over him, and he must have been extremely frightened. That was Sean's last steps. It was his last gasp for breath and his last gasp for help. And he didn't get that from the police.
We wanted to know what happened, and she said that she wasn't really able to tell us because it was an IPCC investigation. But even though the IPCC wouldn't like the fact that she was doing this, she was going to tell us what she could.
Just to be sure about the CCTV, that was one of my first questions, because sometimes the CCTV breaks down here for whatever reason. And that was one of my questions. Is the CCTV working? Is it running? Is it tape in there? You know, very basic, but it's really, really important. And that was all to the affirmative. So the CCTV was running, and they certainly seized it on the night, because they were looking to do that safely so they wouldn't mess the system up or delete anything that was on the tape. So that has been done, and it was running. So there is CCTV in existence, and the IPCC will have that if they haven't got that now.
And she said, and it was working. I'm very pleased that the CCTV has been seized by the IPCC.
My worst nightmare was the CCTV wasn't working, because I can imagine then you think, oh my God, it's just this, cover up, you wipe the tape, you have to take it. Of course you think that. I would think that.
When we eventually went into the IPCC headquarters to view the footage, the camera angles that they were showing us, every single one of us got up and said, where are those other cameras? So they said they didn't know what we were talking about. They said there's no other cameras.
How can the IPCC fail to seize or to see the CCTV above the caged area where Sean had collapsed.
We kept asking them about it and they denied it for 3 weeks, and my solicitor had to write a very strong letter and said, we want a map of the yard and all the positions of the cameras. That's when they came back and said, oh, there are 2 other cameras, but they haven't been working for 3 months.
CCTV cameras in a police station should work. They should be operating, they should be audited and checked that they work, and if they're found not to work, it should be put right within a very short space of time. Why isn't that a disciplinary offence that's dealt with like that?
During that meeting with Suzanne Wallace, we were also asking, my brother very cleverly asked, did you cordon off the arrest scene? And she said, well, no. And he said, why not? Should you have cordoned off the arrest scene? She said, well, the IPCC should have asked us to.
Well, it is a crime scene.
Yeah.
I mean, anyone who dies in custody, I mean, there's, you've got deaths following police contact, which could be a result of a pursuit, etc., but a death in police custody is a crime scene.
There were a number of lessons to be learned from that particular case where the investigator didn't handle the process well and didn't keep the family well informed. And as a result of the family's complaint, the first thing we did was make a change. We changed the investigator.
The police know full well what should be done because they investigate crimes and murders all the time, and they've just stepped back and watched the IPCC do a really shoddy job, perhaps quite gladly.
We also then went on to look at whether the investigator had, what had gone wrong and what he should learn from it. In fact, he's no longer with the IPCC.
Within the first 24 hours, they missed crucial evidence. The CCTV. If we didn't uncover that whole CCTV thing, right, that would have never come to light.
It's quite funny when you set up all facial report, the same thing. Will that be part of the interview, won't it? Can you actually consider this offences? Yes. It's got probation. I can't remember the right terminology, but it's definitely GCP, this interview, can't it? Like 45. What do you mean by the same thing? I'm not sure whether we keep it on call or not. There's MD2, I've got a camera in it. We've got earrings. No, standard. Just wait. Trudy, can we clear the gates? This blood boy is either fitting we have to get him an ambulance, or he's very good at feigning the locks looking at him. He's been very violent outside, now he's feigning unconsciousness and fitting. So we may have to... Andy, can I ask that someone gets an IRB out and starts making notes of his condition and his levels of consciousness, because the hospital will need to know that when he gets there. Hello, I'm Sergeant Fortwhite, plus the Bristol Police Station at 367 Bristol Road.
Anthony, are you alright? Just doing relieved you for... Okay, just make sure you have a break, alright?
Second? No, I don't know, I'm sorry.
We were told by Chris Patridge, who was the lead investigator at the time. He was explaining the injuries to Sean's body. He told us there were marks on his wrist consistent with being cuffed. There was a scratch to his right cheek. There was, you know, scratches to his knees, I believe he said, and elbows. And that was it.
We went to the mortuary and we found Sean behind a locked glass, thick locked sliding doors that were padlocked. Not just padlocked, they had a pole across it. So obviously they had no intentions of us going inside.
I just broke down. I couldn't believe it.
You know, it was devastating. And we just kind of looked at him and cried.
Sean was covered from the neck here down, and you could only view Sean's face from this side to here. You couldn't see the other side of his face.
We went in and went round the other side of Sean's body because we couldn't see from the position where he was at, and there was a mark here in his temple.
We started to shout and say, "What has happened to his head? What is that?" We weren't told about that.
If we did not go in that room that day, right to this day, we would not know that there was an injury to Sean's temple.
But the IPCC had said to us, before we went in there, when they kept saying, "Are you sure?" they said, "You're not allowed to look at any of his body, just no touching, and just look." So saying why, and they saying, well, to protect Sean's dignity.
He's dead. For his dignity. We're his family. We're fighting to find out what happened, and they're talking about for his dignity, you can't look at the rest of his body.
I said, we'll get a pathologist to do this because it's too upsetting. So now this, you know, we were getting more and more disillusioned with this whole investigation and this whole process.
The state is too corrupt to be trusted to investigate itself. When the police kill people, especially when those deaths are declared to be legal, only a fool will believe that the friends or colleagues of the killers will end up diligently investigating or taking such actions which may incriminate the very structures responsible for the deeds in the first place.
The IPCC should not be taking the police's word for things.
I believe this as an ex-cop. I could never understand why a public servant, when asked a reasonable question, wouldn't want to give a reasonable response unless they've got something to hide. And cops say that all the time. Why has that person not said anything? They've got something to hide. And yet they're happy to do it themselves. And I think what we should be doing, and we've asked, is that cops should be compelled, at the very least, as witnesses, to tell us and to give us an account. At the moment, we can't compel.
They were asked, did you use batons? No, was the answer. Did you use CS spray? No. Did you use... No, just handcuffs. And that was taken at face value. That's not an investigation.
The service that we were getting from the IPCC made us feel like they didn't care and that Sean's life did not matter. We started having to do our own investigation and ask our own questions.
The original timescale given for the IPCC investigation was 1 month. It eventually took 18 months to complete.
We were expecting the IPCC report to at least say that there was gross negligence and gross misconduct.
They have found absolutely no misconduct whatsoever.
Even when they had him at the station, Sean was clearly unconscious, right? if not dead, unconscious. And they were standing around him doing nothing. In fact, one officer took his foot and was putting it on Sean's back to see if he was still alive. That's what it seems like to us.
So the question is, why did Sean die on that night? Because when you look at the medical specialist reports, he had a healthy heart, he had no drugs and alcohol in his system. There was no reason why he should have died. They say he died of sudden cardiac death. His heart just stopped beating. But you've got to, why would somebody's heart stop?
I think quite often families believe that someone should be held to blame for the death of their loved one. And that's very understandable that they do feel that. They feel that something must have been done, something wrong must have been done in order for their person to have died. I think the reality is that a lot of people who die in police custody during police arrest do have quite serious medical problems, and their death may not be connected with the police contact. It may actually be to do with their medical condition at the time, and that's very hard for families to accept.
Now, they like to call us emotional. Of course we're emotional, but it doesn't mean to say we're blind or we're stupid, you know? And a lot of things that we've picked up on them, which has been very crucial to the investigation, they've missed.
They should be on the side of the complainant. They should be there to treat the police officers as having a motive to not tell the truth and not reveal everything that happened. That should be the starting point. Treat them with suspicion. It's a reasonable thing, I think, for an independent police complaints commission to do. And that just doesn't exist.
They are not rigorous. They're not doing their job. And it's a shame that it's left to families that should be dealing with their grief, as hard as it is, to be doing the job of investigators and, quite frankly, putting them to shame.
Golden hour turns to golden shower. The investigation's faltered. The stories spun are fictional. Reality's been altered. The officers have got a script, but Hollywood's not calling. Each editor has read the text and given it a mauling. A tale is told. The man went mad. We really tried to help him. Our hands are clean. It's just the job. Well, someone had to get him. We know he's dead, but don't blame us that he has lost his life. It's not as if we used a baton, gun, or knife. No comment, say some officers, but silence can be deafening. Behind closed doors, but still they won't escape their day of reckoning.
They should have separated the police officers involved and interviewed them straight away. Seized their notebooks and interviewed them. That's what should have happened. That's what would happen in any suspicious, murder or death investigation.
I've been to inquests, I've been to court, and I've seen officers give evidence, and I've seen the reaction of the family and the public and the jury to the fact that cops have been allowed to talk to each other before making their statements. It's not good to view that, and it just automatically makes people think, hang on, what on earth's going on? You wouldn't treat a witness like that, would you? And I've got lots of experience in the police where you separate witnesses straight away, you don't let them talk to each other before you take a statement. So I'm uncomfortable with that, but we're working with what we've got at the moment.
We held a vigil outside the Brixton police station for 1 year. Every single Thursday evening, the same time that Sean was brought there to the time that he was taken to the hospital and pronounced dead. We've had to make sure that Sean's death is not completely covered up, and that he's not forgotten, that it doesn't just go away, and we have to keep it in the public eye. We felt that we've had to do that in order to get the authorities to take it seriously and to take us seriously.
He loved him and he loved us, and we didn't expect
you know, the police who were supposed to protect you, instead of being taken to hospital, he was left to die at the police officer's feet. We're trying to force this government to have a public inquiry into death in custody. I'm going to finish you, but I've got a list. Janet said, rightly so, you can't see it because the names are so small, but every single one of those names is very, very significant. There's somebody's brother, father, son, cousin, sister, you know, child, and they're very loved, and they're very loved.
Our independence is in our decision making, and that's in our individual cases, investigations and appeals. That's where our independence is.
Do I think it was impartial and rigorous? Have they been in search for the truth? Absolutely not.
They're not investigating these suspicious and criminal deaths properly. So by the time we get to the CPS, the Crown Prosecution Service, they're saying, well, there's not enough evidence here.
Are we doing the best we can in terms of evidence and presenting the best case? Are we doing that every time? Probably not. So that's where we've got to really be harsh on ourselves, take an inward look and say, okay, we've lost that, but did we lose it? Did we not get a conviction because we let ourselves down? That's what we've got to be harsher about, and that's what I'm doing. Have we presented best evidence? Because if we haven't, why not?
They started from the position where they were very anxious to secure the cooperation, the acceptance by the police. They started from that premise, and it's very difficult once you're locked into that relationship to just step back and think, hold a minute, is that the premise? Is that our starting point? Or do we start from a different perspective and say, we're on the side of the complainant, you now have to satisfy us.
The reek of human blood smiles out. These deaths are more than accidents. The narrative that we must shout is systematic violence. Each brother, mother, father missed, each son or daughter, sister missed. Unwilling martyrs who sometimes die in the frenzied glint of a policeman's eye. By bullet, baton, gas and fist, by choking, biting in blood mist. No cops in jail in all these years, no cops in jail for all these tears. And those of you who do not march, who swallow lies and promises that all policemen keep the peace, you live false hope they'll keep you safe, you give consent for them to kill. It's time to rise, forget your fears, resistance is the key. This trickle of humanity will turn into a sea. It's time to march for all those gone, with tears and fists combined. All power to the people is what is on our mind.
We're not there actually to fight for the family. That isn't our job. They may wish we were there, and I think some start by thinking that's what we're there for, rather like some people think that the CPS prosecutor is their lawyer in court. They're not. They're there for the Crown, and in the same way we are here to be the public's champion, if you like, in the system, not any individual family member or any individual police officer.
If a police officer commits fraud or does something like that, they will end up in the dock and they will end up going to prison. But when it comes to someone dying in their custody, it seems like whatever agencies are involved, the CPS, the IPCC, you know, the government, the state does everything they can to cover it up, because who protects them? The police protect them. So they protect the police as well.
Ultimately, we are a creature of statute. Parliament created us, and tomorrow Parliament could decide that the IPCC should no longer exist.
I think if the IPCC went at the moment, you'd be back to the days, and you know, I was in those days where the police were investigating police. There was nothing outside it, and surely that's just, for me, a retrograde step. Yes, it means we've got to do more work to convince the public, but why would you get rid of, I think, what is a successful product?
They're not fit for purpose. They're not doing their job, which is robustly and independently investigate the police.
Right, and there's enough families here today that feel it and know what it feels like. I'm telling you, it's not no nice thing. The night the officers came to my house and tell us that our brother died, our lives changed. I'm now an activist.
Investigators followed trails gone cold, corrupted by their friendships old. This useless watchdog seen its day, it's dying, neutered, gone astray. The watchdog has now been on trial. It did not go the extra mile. It's guilty of insanity and crimes against humanity.
Organized resistance to police brutality is a fundamental right. All of us have the right to live. The first and foremost right is the right to life and the right to defend this life. This means that the right to self-defense is a non-negotiable human right. The nature of the defense depends on the nature of the attack and the attacker. If we are attacked by someone carrying a stone, we have the right to defend ourselves by picking up a stone. But when we are attacked by institutions of the state, we cannot simply defend ourselves individually. Whilst the right to mount armed defense is a fundamental human right, if the attackers are armed, the most important weapon that people have against police brutality is in the development of social organizations that are armed with political clarity and resist through this organization.
In his poetry about the Long March, Chairman Mao said, "To reach the top of the mountains, we must aim for the clouds."
I keep fighting because I want to know what happened to my brother. I want justice. My brother is not here to speak for himself, and therefore I will do it for him.
I'm not going to let them get away with doing that to my brother. You can't. They cannot get away with it. And that's what keeps me going. And because we know that Sean was a determined person, and if it was any one of us, he would be doing the same thing.
Sean, oh my God, we love you. We really miss you. Really miss you. Wish you could be with us when we go to America and see Mum. Wish we'd made that last trip that we were going to make to go and see Aunt Mel. And it's not the same without you. Despite the difficult times, it's not the same without you.